Thank you, guys. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention that I added this green line under the link here after Sean's presentation yesterday. So I encourage you guys, everything that you're hearing here, I encourage you to go straight home and apply the things that you're learning. So I am Zach Saucier. I am a student at the University of Georgia in the United States, and I work as a front-end developer in my free time and during my summers creating things like this. And my talk today is something that's more focused on design and user experience than it is development. But as front-end developers, design is an important aspect of what we do because we're the ones implementing it, and we do have the ability to provide feedback, and we want to make sure that the experience that our users have is really the best that they possibly can have. And so for something to have meaning, it really needs to have a purpose behind it, and it needs to fulfill that purpose well. So we need to keep that in mind no matter what it is we're developing or designing. And so each website or application that we create, has one of a certain amount of purposes behind it. And so even if you don't know that it has a purpose, it does have a purpose behind it. I hope you do. You definitely should. But at times, it's a little bit unclear, and I encourage all of you guys to know that purpose, even if it's just some little module that you're creating or something to that extent. You need to know the purpose behind it. But as for the web in general, we have a few main purposes. The first is relationships, and so this could be anything from Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn. It's connecting people together, whether it's a new connection or one that you already have, where you're strengthening that relationship or you're keeping that relationship with somebody across the world. Second is information. This is the primary purpose of the web since it was created. It's a collection of documents, and the web is information shared with other people. That's the primary purpose. A third is transactions, so this is like eBay or anything to that extent. You also have entertainment, which could be in the form of gaming or really anything that it just keeps us entertained, whether it be Netflix or whatever. So like I said, everything has a purpose behind it. This is what we want the web to be. We want it to be a collection of ideas that connect people and that connect people to ideas so that the world can be a more open place and more accepting place, something that helps us live our lives better. But the problem with this is that we cannot connect these ideas directly to people. We can't use telepathy or anything like that directly with them because we're working with a collection of documents that are put together. And so the medium of the internet is not, or even just devices in general, is not optimal for what we want to be doing because we want to be connecting directly with people. And so we want to do everything that we can to try and get towards that direct communication with people. And using animations well is a great way to do this, in addition to having being accessible to everybody and doing everything that we should be, like the other speakers have talked about so far. So like I said, there are many different ways that we as humans can understand information. The first is visual. This is the primary mode of understanding for technological devices like phones or computers or anything like that, because we're looking at things, we're looking at the characters, the words, we're putting that together and understanding it in that way. But that's not the only way that we can understand things. We can also understand things through the movement of them, the movement of us interacting with them, the spatial awareness, so that's the 3D environment that helps us understand it better. Tactile, which is just the feeling, the textures, anything like that. And then aural, which is the audio portion of it. And so I got these points from Brett Victor's talk on the subject. It's a great talk. I recommend all of you guys to watch it. But the medium that we're working with is kind of broken in that we cannot address all of these modes of understanding in a perfect way. Like, we're not making the best use of it. But we can make use of it in a better way than we currently are. Because the web is the best way to communicate with people currently across the world and with everybody, but we don't do it as well as we could. And so today, I'm going to be talking about how to do that with animations. A way to go is a project that uses a lot of these modes of understanding well, and I encourage you to look at that in the link. Okay, so imagine that you have never heard of electricity before, that electricity is this foreign concept, you've never seen lightning, you never have had any electricity at all. How could I convey to you what electricity is? I could show you this picture, show you that there's this what looks like light coming from one thing and going to another thing, but that doesn't really describe what electricity is or what it does. And so some other ways I could describe electricity to you are to show you a video of electricity, which would show how fast it's moving and that it's actually not those aren't cords or anything, those are actually light that's moving really, really quickly. That'll help you understand it better. And if I actually have you if I put you in a room with these two things connecting, you can tell how big it is by looking at the surrounding environment and tell that it's actually, these nodes are probably really, really close together, and the electricity is probably just a fraction of what it looks like in this picture. But that helps you understand better about what electricity is and how it works. And in addition, you could hear it. You could hear the crackling that the electricity makes when it connects from node to node. And the I forget the other point, but essentially the point here is that that you can understand a topic better a lot more when you're using these additional modes of understanding. So we want to be doing that wherever we can. But the web is great because there are things unique to it that we can't make use of in other mediums. And so along with that is media, like the video element that we've been talking about, or anything to that extent. We can also serve dynamic content based on the user's profiles that we have, based on their location, based on previous history, and serve that live to them, which is awesome. You can't do that with a book or anything like that. Another characteristic is fitting it to the screen, so you can view the same thing on your phone as you can with your laptop or even your big TV here. It's exactly the same content served on different platforms. And the same thing for different browsers, different countries. You can be using something completely different than somebody else and still be viewing the same content. We want to make that look as good as we can. And the last thing that I'll be focusing on today is that it's animatable, that we can move things around in a way to help create these other modes of understanding in a way that make use of it, it's not a physical thing, but we can kind of fake it using animation. And so the modern web is very, very capable. This second example is using WebGL to render a bunch of hearts with like live shadowing and lighting and things like that. And the top example is one where it's a web page where a song is playing, and as a user, you can click the buttons or you can use your keyboard to interact with music, add notes to it, and the animations help convey the understanding of what's going on, help build the entire experience and make it more enjoyable. So the modern web, like we've been talking about through this whole conference, is just getting better and better, and we're not really restricted to what it can do anymore. We're restricted by the thought behind it and by our ideas more than we are the medium itself. And so with that, design is becoming more and more important. So design is the purpose or intention that exists or is thought to exist behind an action, fact, or material object. And so essentially what design really is design is being intentional with whatever we're doing. It's knowing that purpose behind each aspect and making sure that that aspect fulfills its purpose all the time. And so this makes style more than just something you add on. It is substance. It does make processes easier. It builds trust with users. It gets conversions, and it retains those customers because of the enhanced experience, because of that extra understanding that design provides. And so now I'm going to be talking about some reasons for animations. There are three main categories of reasons, per se. The first is to convey meaning through animation. The second is to redirect users' focus. The third is for general enjoyment. So this example here is just a very, very simple animation next to the navigation, which shows which section is currently being viewed. And so that helps users both create a mental model of the website that helps the user flow understand what's coming next, and is just a generally enjoyable animation to look at. It's something that keeps the user focused on the content, but still entertained in a nice little lovely way. Another way is to show contrast. So the example on the left is a logo that I worked on. The actual logo is this expanded state that you see. But the animation helps convey the thought of breaking out of the box much more than a static image would. And that's not something that you, like I said, the animation is what actually provides that additional meaning, that additional understanding. On the right, it's a very kind of a newer concept, but a concept that I really like. It involves the user themselves using this slider to show the difference between the green screen and the final image, providing that additional understanding of how this scene was created. And it also gets the user involved, which that interaction is very valuable, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So another way we can convey meaning through animation is by conveying purpose for things. So this is probably my favorite example that I have today. It's very, very simple, but very, very meaningful. So when the add to bag button is clicked, the image just simply moves to the cart, and the cart updates the total cost with the additional cost of the item. And so this conveys a whole bunch of meaning in it. It conveys, hey, your action was successful, and now it's in this part, and you know exactly where to get there, and the cost is being increased. And that's shown all through that one little animation, but incredibly meaningful. So it's touches like this that make a website more than just good or more than just usable. It makes them really exceptional websites. And so another way you can use animations is through showing completion. This post pulled from the Daily Beast just shows how, as you scroll through the article, meaning you've read it, the navigation on the right shows the progress. And so this helps users understand how much more they have to read, helps them be more motivated to complete it because it's a type of gamification, small but still gamification. And it also provides the second or third or however many they have articles beneath the original article. So if you want to continue reading, like you enjoy the post, it also provides that right there next to the original article, so you can continue reading if you want. Another way you can show completion in a different way, this is just a small checklist, but lovely design in my opinion, simply because it shows that transition between the states and has just an appealing look to it, and you can easily glance at the list and know, all right, I don't need to worry about those that have been checked off. I can just focus on the ones that are remaining. And so the loaders are a big, you see loaders all the time on CodePen and things like that. So loaders are important because they help users not focus on how long things are taking, and so they can at least look at something. The one on the left is a very conventional loader. It's kind of boring. It's not particularly meaningful in what it does, but it does help. It's better than nothing. The one on the right is much better, I think, even though it's very, very branded, and so not every company could pull off something like that, which could be a very good thing. If you can pull off something like that, please do. But it conveys extra meaning in the animation itself because it shows the jetpack man going from one place to the next, showing that redirecting action. That's the type of animation we really want. Even better transition than that, I think, would be this one, pulled from Google Material Design's style guidelines. And so, as seen in the demo, the image actually opens up into a full page. And this is something that we've gained the capability of in recent years, and something that we're starting to see in actual websites. And I'm really excited to see this more often because it helps create that 3D spatial awareness of where the user is, how to get back to where they were, and provides that meaning that we're really wanting. So the next big reason we have animations is for redirecting focus. So this could be notification, and it could be for animated loaders like the ones that we saw on the screen before, or it could be something simple like this, just the next elements in the page being faded in and being shown as the page is scrolled. So this helps the user, even though it's a vertical, like convention, it follows convention and goes vertically, it still helps the user focus on the next content that to be read, and help them realize that there's more content to be seen and not just something static. It also makes use of two different ways of animating. It slides in and fades in, and that combination of combining two different ways of animating is one of the principles of animation, which I don't have time to talk about today, but I linked to in the back, and really helps the animation seem more high quality and more realistic to us as humans. So here's an example of what not to do. So in this example, the images are indeed related to the text on the left. And so when you get to a different section, it changes the image based on the content. But the problem with this is that the transition from one image to another is very abrupt. It stops the user from reading it, and it makes it so that they focus instead on the image. And so it doesn't fulfill its purpose, because as the user is reading, you want them to understand your thought. You want them to be reading the actual article. You don't want them to focus on something else and stop their train of thought. But this abrupt change forces them to do just that. And so using that same thought, we can do it in a much better way using a transition, like Wired does here. So it still keeps the images relevant to the content on the left, but as you can tell, keeps it so that it's not an abrupt change, it's a transition from one image to the next. You can visually see when the next transition is going to happen, and the user is not surprised or distracted by that change of image while still keeping it relevant. And the last big reason for animation is just for general enjoyment. So this is oftentimes little things that help make your experience, or help make your application or website stand out from all the rest. And so it's not some big, fancy thing oftentimes, it's just the little things. And so in this example, it shows how an animated list is moved in from the left. So both of them do a good job of creating spatial awareness by coming in from the left, but the staggered animation is much better because it is more appealing to us as humans because of that double-factored animation like I mentioned before. GitHub, there's a lovely little transition here for viewing the languages for a given project, which the information that it shows isn't required, which is good because it's not shown initially. But it helps it not create cluttered visual space by still providing additional info by using this toggled state. And it's a lovely little animation, I thought. And so, like I said before, we really need to know our purpose when creating these things. From the very, very minute things, we still need to know the purpose behind those and to execute that purpose well. And so, an example of this is Citymapper versus Google Maps. So you might not have heard of Citymapper. It's a very similar app to Google Maps. But the thing here is that they understood user flow really, really well. They cut down the amount of time it took to find directions to a location from about 20 seconds on Google Maps to 10 seconds, which is half of the time. That just takes understanding user flow really well, keeping the animations, keeping the transitions between pages really short, and fulfilling the purpose of the application well. Now we move on to things that you shouldn't do. And all of you guys do some things that you shouldn't do. I know that for a fact. And there are a lot of them. So as a user, you shouldn't take away, well, as a developer, as a company, you shouldn't distract me as a user. You shouldn't take away my control. You shouldn't distract me. You shouldn't remove me from the flow, or hide content, or make me wait, or add meaningless effects. And so I'll go into each of those. First is taking away my control. The worst sites about doing this are one-page websites, where it takes up the full screen, and they try and make me do something that I'm not used to. So in this example, it actually shows a broken version, which most of them are broken. I tried to scroll using my mouse wheel, and it jumped from the first section to the second section, and then transitioned to the third section. I was just trying to go to the second one. They're trying to make it more pleasant for me by giving me this full experience, making the maximum use, but it really ended up in this broken state because of poor implementation, and really did not make me comforted as a user. So as a user, we are used to convention. We are used to being able to scroll the way we're used to. We have these norms, and if somebody takes those away, it makes us feel less secure. It makes us feel like we're not in control, which is not something that we want. We want users to be comfortable and to enjoy the experience of the website. So this is the same type thing, but instead of restricting my scroll, they just made it so on scroll, new content is shown, but that leads to other problems. That leads to content not being shown sometimes. Like, I thought there was going to be more content at the end there, but there wasn't. It just leads to more problems. So a way to avoid this is to not do this at all. We want to try and forget the concept of a page. We want to create an experience that makes users comfortable and not rely on this page aspect that we're used to from books. But modifying control can sometimes be okay. So as a Windows user, I'm not used to being able, usually when I scroll with a scroll wheel, it's a kind of, it moves in chunks, not some type of smooth scroll. And so on this website, it actually modified the scrolling, so it eased in and eased out, which was really a pleasant experience. And the first experience where they took away some of my control, and I really enjoyed it as a user. So this is just another example of what not to do. So in this Angular site, I scrolled with my mouse wheel literally 20 times before it popped back to the exact same screen. I don't know what they were thinking, making me scroll that much just to try and get to the next page. I had to do it 21 times to get to the next page. But that is not a pleasant experience for users. So another thing is distracting me. So here I am reading this article, and every time the scene changes, I get distracted by this bald guy that's talking up there. I'm trying to read the article, not whatever it is that's going on, and so that just breaks the experience that I have and makes me focus on whatever it is that's happening up there and not on the content that you want me to be reading. So this is the same thing. It's another news website. They do it awfully all the time. But instead, it moves over the whole content whenever part of the navigation is hovered, which is entirely distracting, and it makes it so that I cannot continue reading the line that I was on if I accidentally hover it or something like that. So this is an example pulled from CodeDrops, actually. It's a lovely little animation. But the problem here is that it takes users out of the flow completely. So if you imagine being a grandma or something and clicking this hamburger menu, it opens up this whole new page covering up everything that was being seen. So it takes her completely out of the context of the previous page. This could be solved by adding a little bit of transparency to the background or something like that, so to where the user's still in the same environment, still in the same page, but that navigation is still shown. Another example is this one of covering up images that I want to be seeing the image, but when I hover over it, it covers it up completely by the title and the helpful text. And this is a useful thing, it's just done very poorly. A much better implementation is this one, pulled from CodeDrops, that shows the image still, but also provides that additional information in a lovely, lovely way. So I encourage you guys to use resources like CodeDrops and things like that, but be intelligent about the choices you make, because there are still poor ones among these examples. I just didn't choose to show them. So another thing that people do wrong is making me wait as a user. And so this is a marathon website. all of the animations on this website take a really, really long time to load. I guess they're trying to prepare me for the marathon that's going to happen, because that's really long. But as a user, I don't know if content's going to be coming during that time. There's a period in this GIF where I stopped thinking that there was going to be more content, but there wasn't. It just leads to a whole bunch of problems, and you're wasting my time, which is not something that you want to be doing. And the last thing that you want to avoid is meaningless effects. So this is a website that a developer friend of mine made for himself. I'm sure it was really fun to make, and it's kind of cool, but as a website, that's pretty unusable and not very inspiring. It doesn't achieve its purpose well, and the blink element is a great example of this. It's just a meaningless effect that, sure, it distracts them, but it distracts them. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. So some general notes that we can make from this is that a good conversation is two ways. It's not one person just standing there and speaking to you. Like, this is not good conversation that we're having. It's one person talking. But as an application, as a website, you want to have some conversation with your user. You don't want to just be telling them things the whole time. So we can do that by raising questions and answering them. Those don't mean literal questions. That means intriguing users using when you have a big header photo, for example, and you have the little arrow pointing to more content or even showing more content at the bottom of the page, it intrigues users and helps them understand that there's more content to be seen, raising that question and having the user answer it themselves. This interaction between clients is incredibly, incredibly valuable. So it helps users remember the experience and enjoy the experience more, because it's not just one person talking, not just the site telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing. It's them exploring it themselves and making it a more personal experience. And as developers and designers, we don't want mediocre experiences, because that does not get conversions. That does not help people remember us. That just makes it okay. That just makes it a website like every other. And even if we've put a whole bunch of time into it, we want to still get rid of it if it's not achieving our purpose and if it's not the best thing for us, because it's not the best thing for us. It doesn't matter how much time we've put into it if it's not the best. And so everything that I've covered today are just guidelines. The important thing is to think how users will do it, and to actually prototype what we're doing and to user test everything. So even if we've gone through something 50 times ourselves, it doesn't matter if the end user doesn't understand it. So it's important to prototype and test throughout the entire process, and to do it well. And like I said earlier, it's important also to steal well, and not like actually steal anything, of course, but to use other people's ideas and build off of the community that we have. Coming to conferences and things like this help us understand how we can convey our purpose better and understand ways in which to do so. And so it's important to do that, but also think about every time that we're taking something, and not just copy and paste it, but to copy it, change it the way that we need it, and then use it in production. And so along with this is just thinking a lot and thinking well about everything that we're doing. So like I said, thinking about every module that we're making, not just the end function, not just the end goal, but how we're getting there through each step that we have. And so, like I mentioned before, there are principles of animation that I definitely encourage you guys to look at. There are 12 different ones that help humans understand animation and make it more realistic to us. There's also a site that provides user flow examples, particularly through animation, of applications and things that do it well, and I encourage you guys to look at that. There are also design details of a bunch of different applications. This one is just of Inbox and how the animations of it help user flow. And by reading those, you can better understand really how good companies do it and how you can do a similar thing in your own application. And Google's material design guidelines also do help in this way. They're not incredibly focused on animation, but they do have a good section on it. And the last resource is my own resources page on my website, zachsaucier.com. And it has some introductory posts of how to create animations on the web, as well as some more general posts. But besides that, I'm Zach Saucier, and you can find me at Zach Saucier on Twitter, or go to my site or my code pin. So thank you.
So don't you think adding animations may impose performance problems on mobile devices?
Can you restate that question?
Do you think, well, adding animations may pose performance problems on mobile devices? For example, like when we put all the cool animations that you talk about, then people with older mobile devices won't be able to experience them, or it will become jittery or something.
Okay. So your question is about performance on mobile for animations? Really, mobile browsers perform really quite well these days, or most of the ones that people are using anyway. So the key is using small, that are not very intensive animations. Like the add to cart animation, for example, is very, very simple. It just uses transform of an element to another using just a transform like X, transform translate animation. So keeping the animations simple themselves is very important to do, especially for mobile. So you wouldn't do some like full WebGL scene in mobile browsers just for like a regular website or something like that. So it's important to tailor content and animations to that to some extent. But a large part of it is being handled as long as you animate smartly. Some properties that you don't want to be using are like changing the actual dimensions of elements or anything like that. You want to try and stick to transforms and to opacity and to other properties that animate well. But as long as you're using those properties that animate well and not being too intense with the animations, mobile browsers perform really well. So that's not something that we really need to be too focused on. But like I said, you always want to be testing no matter what it is that you're developing.
How do you draw the line between animations that improve user experience and animations that might have an impact on accessibility issues?
That's a good question. So I haven't worked too much with designing for disabilities or something like that. You probably need to speak to somebody who's more focused on that. But I would say that a part of testing is, or part of testing well anyway, is including people who either are affected with some disability, whether it be color blindness or something like that, or by including somebody who can review your animations and the development to make sure that they don't break standards in that area, that they are accessible to those type of clients. But yeah, it's important to have other people reviewing the final design, reviewing each step of the design to make sure that it is accessible and things like that. So the people need to have that type of understanding when they are reviewing. I think there's a question here.
So would you recommend using CSS3 all the time, or is there some alternative?
Cool. So CSS3 has very good support across the board. It's very good for UI animation, particularly like bringing up a modal, or not that you should use modals, but bringing up a modal or any type of small little animation. Oftentimes it's very good to toggle a class to toggle a class on an element using a little bit of JavaScript. And so oftentimes CSS is good for that, but for more complex animations or it's often good to use a JavaScript library like GSAP, Green Stock Animation Platform, or use something more a little bit smaller but not quite as versatile like velocity.js. They can also be used for UI animation, but it depends on the animation itself and the team that's working with it. So to answer your question, try and stick to CSS animations, but don't be absurd about it in production. When necessary, using a JavaScript animation library can be very, very useful and is recommended.
Hey, I really liked your talk.
Thank you.
And I noticed that you said that we should do user testing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, because I tried to actually propose that in like 2 places where I worked, and they always say no. So I wanted to ask you if you actually do it.
So I do it. In the applications and websites that I've made, even if it's not some formal, long, drawn-out process, just having even my family members or my friends that are around use the application or website that I'm building is very useful because they are able to provide that additional input. In addition to the other workers that are not necessarily working on the project, having them do the same type of thing. But it depends on the scale of the application. So obviously, if you're a company like Google, you're going to need a lot more user testing, and you have that ability to. But if you're small scale, user testing is still something that needs to be done. It just can't necessarily be done with hundreds of people. It just might be done with a smaller group that you know or something like that. So I do recommend it for all companies, regardless of size, regardless of purpose. But the scale at which that happens does vary based on the company and the circumstances. Great. Thanks for having me and being my audience, guys.